Um, I want to talk to you about the importance of questioning, specifically questioning anything that stands between you and your peace, your internal peace and your peace with other people, between you and love, your self-love and your love of the world around you and those that are in it. I never understood how important it was to talk about questioning until I understood that some people don't question. Not anything they've learned or been taught, even if that thing that they've been taught has caused them tremendous pain and suffering. I'm a singer-songwriter. I was born and raised here in San Antonio, and I'm also a childhood trauma survivor. I wrote a book about what it was like to grow up with the effects of trauma in my life and how that impacted all my relationships and my career in the music industry. And the book is called Too Sweet, Songs for Setting Boundaries. It's also the name of the EP that I wrote that goes with it. And I titled it that because I always had an issue setting boundaries. I didn't know what healthy ones looked like. I didn't know where I ended and other people began. And that caused a huge mess. I forgot I needed my glasses. So as an adult, when I was finally and literally sick of the chaos in my life, I did a great deal of work to unravel that mess. We all grow up immersed in culture. We're surrounded by many different belief systems that offer us answers to our questions why. And my questions of why were, why did this happen to me? Why don't I ever feel safe or happy? Why do I always make the same mistakes? Why do I keep ruining my life? Sometimes our belief systems don't have the answers that we're seeking, and to add to that, in many communities, questioning the prevailing wisdom is discouraged. The questioning has already been done for us on our behalf, and we're expected to accept the answers that are given to us by those deemed wiser or closer to God. What my environment made clear to me as a young Catholic girl who had been violated at a very young age was that I was unclean, impure, and somehow responsible. No one said that to me. No one even knew. It's just what I gathered from Sunday school and what I heard at the pulpit and among conversations in the congregation. And for a very long time, I believed I was guilty. And I was in no hurry to confirm that with an authority, so I didn't speak up, and no one contradicted those ideas about my responsibility and my impurity. So I grew up believing that I was the problem. And when you believe that you're the problem, you will find many ways to be a problem. Many people who experience trauma end up in unhealthy relationships, and I was no exception. My relationships often looked great on the surface, but they were very unstable, and somehow I'd always managed to sabotage them. I was desperate for love, and when I needed and knew that I needed to figure out how to keep from failing at it. For a long time, and even in my marriage, I thought it was the job of someone else to fix me. But that puts a lot of pressure on other people, and the good ones will fold under that pressure. The not so good ones will take that opportunity to exploit, feed off your desperation for love and acceptance, and I'd often lose myself in the process. It took me decades to understand the impacts of what happened to me as a child and why I never felt safe, why I gravitated towards controlling people in certain areas of my life. And changing that pattern took me asking a million questions. Why? Why do I do this? Why am I so afraid all the time? Why do I believe these horrible things about myself? What I learned in many, many years of therapy was that I had an obsessive need for certainty and a compulsive need to control my environment. I lived in fear all the time of not being loved, accepted, or protected. But that's what we all fear. It's why we seek relationship and why we seek community. That's natural and it's a good thing. But in that seeking, we become vulnerable, for better and worse. We can find true intimacy when we're vulnerable to people who are safe, who have our best interests in mind. And we go through hell when we're vulnerable with people who don't have our best interests in mind. And even sometimes with well-meaning people who might lead us away from finding and following our own internal wisdom. Still, it's important to find our community, the right people, our safe places. It's important to keep seeking those things beyond because they will sustain us. It just takes a lot of energy to be introspective. to question yourself and your motivations and what stands in your way of finding the life you want. And it's even more difficult to question your community, the people you've found or inherited, who give you a sense of who you are in the world. It takes a lot to pull at all those strings that hold your world together, but that's the way we grow. That dissatisfaction we feel in our hearts from time to time is a call to growth, to get past our pain, our limitations, our own smallness, and we do that by questioning what we know and seeking truth when our beliefs don't stand up to that questioning. As I've said before, I grew up in the Catholic Church. I accepted the priest's homily as God's lesson for us. That was taught as the truth, and I never considered that it was an opinion or an interpretation. I was taught it was fact, and I took it that way without question, at least in the beginning, and then the teenage years hit. I grew up with two very different views of the church in my household. There was my mother. She worked for the church nearly all my life. She was very progressive, though, and she taught us that the best way to live our faith was to serve those less fortunate. She taught us not to judge other people for their color or their creed or their position in society. And I saw the church through her eyes as community and a way to serve the world. There was a lot of beauty and purpose in that. And then there was my father, who wanted nothing to do with the church. He was suspicious of its leaders and wondered where all that collection plate money went from week to week. He went to Catholic school as a child, and the nuns literally beat him for speaking Spanish, his first language. He was not a fan. And Sunday school was about all he would tolerate in religious education for us, his daughters. Through his eyes, I saw the church and its leaders as deeply flawed and very intimidating. So I had questions, but I was terrified to question. I didn't want to feel threatened, condemned, stupid. I didn't want to have my hands beaten with rulers. It's very intimidating for a child to question religious authority, so I didn't. But I was also a child who didn't like doing what she was told, especially if I didn't understand why I was doing it. I didn't like saying things I didn't mean or believe. And I developed an issue with reciting the Nicene Creed, which was our profession of beliefs in the Catholic Church. I struggled with this one line: I believe in one holy, Catholic, and apostolic church. That sounded very exclusive to me. And it made me feel that people I loved, people who weren't Catholic, were excluded. I had friends who weren't religious. I had friends of other religions. I had friends that the church officially and unofficially condemned. And one of the most difficult things for me to reconcile with the church was the love I had for my friends in the LGBTQ community, and the church's message that they were wrong to be who they were. I didn't like the idea of being in one holy church if it meant I was isolated from people I loved, so I protested the only way I knew how. When that line came up, I just shut my mouth and didn't say it. From then on, I became fascinated with religion and learned about different beliefs. I especially loved learning that what I was taught to believe wasn't the only thing there was to believe. Especially when some belief I'd held was a source of fear or sadness. Like, for instance, someone you love is going to burn for all eternity. Learning that other people didn't have that same belief was such a relief. It made my heart feel lighter and unburdened. And that lightness, that relief that I felt right in the center of my chest, that's something I can finally believe in. That was my first experience of finding out what it felt like to find something that was true for me. That was my first clue that once I got past fear and uncertainty, I had an internal compass that I could literally feel, and it led me to truth, my truth. I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and I also suffered sexual assault as a young adult. As a result, I have complex PTSD and OCD that manifests in morbid, debilitating fears and a compulsive need to control aspects of my environment. So I've lived with a lot of fear and have had a lot of control issues. In many ways, I was afraid of anything light. I distrusted happiness and I distrusted joy. But relief from fear, that's something I could understand. That's something I could hold on to. And the one thing that could consistently pull me away from fear was love. It was always towards being completely in love with someone or something. I would fall deeply in love with other people, for better or worse, friends, family, nature, ideas. It always felt right and better to love than to condemn, and to be in love. That's why I would go overboard, overdose on relationships, become addicted to them, instinctively knowing that love was the answer to fear, even if I didn't yet understand how to sustain it or keep it healthy. And having so much love, I couldn't believe that certain people in any one group, by their own doing, were beyond God's love. Certainly God's love was a perfect love. It should be bigger and more encompassing than my own, shouldn't it? So why did my belief system put such limitations on love? With that question, I had to start forming my own new belief system. And that was where all the questioning came in. Why does anyone condemn anyone? Why do we have to believe the same things? Why do we fight over faith? My mother has her master's degree in pastoral theology. She studied Christian Catholic scriptures as a source of truth. And I very recently asked her what she'd been taught about allowing for and acknowledging other religious beliefs, the issue of pluralism, because I was giving a talk on pluralism. And she said, not a lot, but that she understood it was generally frowned upon by many Catholic theologians. Now, she works at interfaith communities, so these are not her words, but to paraphrase, this is what I understand the church's issue with pluralism to be. If there are many truths, then nothing is true. I understand why people take that position, because I recognize the fear that's in that. If people question a belief system, then they don't uphold it as truth, and then they're pulling at the strings that hold the belief system together, and then it falls apart. Who has control? How do we keep it together? What takes its place? Chaos? Evil? I get that fear. I've lived that fear. And I know that questioning leads to chaos. That as a result, the world as you know it can fall apart. Mine did. When I started questioning my beliefs, I lost relationships and I lost communities. Nothing would ever be the same. But that was the point. It had to change. It had to get better. And the less fear, the better. Making decisions in fear leads to far worse outcomes than making decisions in love. There's no freedom in fear. There's no lightness of being, no relief in that center of your chest. There's just the need to control and not trust, and that's not faith. But to love, to really love, is to allow and to accept and to trust and to follow where truth leads. I think one of the best attributes of being in a faith community is having community, having that source of comfort and guidance. When we're lost, those are the things we need from each other. And there are many things we as human beings feel lost about. All the things we can't control. Our own mortality, violence, cruelty, abuse, fear, illness, poverty, natural disasters, heartbreak, and especially our own failings. And so many people feel lonely and isolated and ashamed, so disempowered by what they may believe about themselves. I had a pattern of destroying my own life and relationships on repeat. I had very little reason to trust myself and my own judgment. I needed community. I needed comfort. I needed guidance. But what I chased was certainty. Tell me I'm safe. Tell me exactly how to ensure my safety. Tell me how to be and how not to be. Tell me what is wrong with me and how to stop suffering. Give me all the answers. Give them to me. But that was the problem. Someone would give me an answer and it wouldn't be enough, because they weren't my answers, and I would be dependent on someone else for my direction. And if I went to a faith community and the advice was to just accept an idea without question, well, I had a lot of questions. When you tell me not to question, you've created 1,000 more. Tell me not to doubt, and I don't think so. I was once told I had to stop questioning and just pray for the gift of faith. But I've never come to believe something faithfully because I ignored or suppressed my doubts about it. My faith has always been strengthened by exploring my doubts, even when I was afraid of what the truth might be. That's how I learned to recognize what rang true in my heart, and how to find my inner compass and whether I was being led by fear or love. That's why I believe, and wrote about in my book, that the most good we can do for other people is honoring their path to truth on their own terms. We need communities that allow for continuous growth and questioning. We can't give someone faith. You can't force faith. Compliance is not faith. The idea that we have to believe the same thing, that's fear, deciding that the only way to ensure safety is to control everything. And that's not love. It might feel like love because sometimes it feels protective, saving everyone from a horrible fate. But believing people need to be saved by a specific idea is a response to fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of punishment, fear of what we don't understand. We fight each other and take flight from each other because we fear learning that our worst fears about ourselves are true. And through all that questioning, what I learned is that the way to peace is to learn how to tolerate uncertainty, to understand that we don't have all the answers. And where I find comfort is knowing that love is always true. And if love is true, and it always is, then what we fear is never the whole truth. It's never the end of the story, not in my experience, though I know we each have to learn that for ourselves. But that's why it's so important to question anything that keeps you from love, or from joy, or from peace. Anything that isolates you and pushes you away from your fellow humans in the world. Seek truth and move past those who stand in your way of seeking it. Anyone who discourages and instills fear of finding it. Anyone who tells you you should not find or trust your own inner compass is afraid of what they can't control. And what we should never trust is fear. Fear should always be questioned. That's what conquers it. That's the path to truth. I understand the hesitation to poke holes in ideas we've all long accepted. What if I unravel the world as I know it? But if you fear the chaos that comes with changing what you believe, or being different than you were before, or of losing people who liked you better when you fell in line with their truth and their beliefs and expectations, take comfort in knowing that nothing true is ever threatened by questioning. Nothing true is ever threatened by questioning. Questions do not destroy the truth. Questions are not the same as doubt or disbelief. Questions are clarifying. If done sincerely without fear or intent to destroy, they pave the way to truth. This is what I believe about truth, that it's larger than any one person or any one community can define. That any one of us only sees the small part that we can see from our perspective. Individually, we can't possibly have the whole picture. And in order for us to see more of the truth, we have to allow others to find and bring theirs. Only then do we see more, by looking through each other's eyes. We start to see the wholeness we all belong to. As I wrote in my book, if you don't allow room for someone else's why, their search for truth and their unique perspective, you're cutting yourself off from a bigger picture to keep everyone under control with a very limited one. Thank you so much for having me.
Feel that you are surrounded by love here in this room, in a group of fellow truth seekers. But that love and safety is present everywhere you are, under every circumstance. All of you is welcome. All of you is affirmed. All of you is lifted up in the light of love. Now, and now, And I want you to open your vision to include the others in this room and far beyond, to see that all beings are perfect, whole, and complete. That whatever is challenging or dismaying to you is simply an invitation to see deeper. Let us open our hearts to all beings. Remembering truly, love is the only power. May all beings be blessed by your willingness to see and feel and do